Welcome to Her Remarkable History. Remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. The unburied king left to rot for centuries. Now, Catherine of Valois is known as the queen who was left unburied for 400 years, until she was finally reinterred in Westminster Abbey. Her remains were tampered with and even kissed by morbid tourists, who even stole parts of her remains. But there was a king who was also left to rot for centuries and was left unburied for a significant amount of time. James IV was the King of Scotland, and he was a king who reigned over the country for 25 years, and he saw the Scottish crown being very profitable. He increased royal revenue and also commissioned the building of Holyrood Palace, which today still is in the hands of the British monarchy. But he was a king who had tense relations with England, and he is also known as the last British king who died on the battlefield when his Scottish warriors faced Henry VIII's English troops at the Battle of Flodden. But after his death, his remains went on a shocking and remarkable journey, and his body was not treated in a way which you could think a king's remains should be. But what is the story behind the unburied king left to rot for centuries? James IV was born in the March of 1473 at Stirling Castle. He was crowned king on the 24th of June 1488 at Scone Abbey. One of the first duties James did was to attend the burial of his father, and he was seen as a wise and good ruler early on. He left much of his government to be run by the 1st Earl of Bothwell and also the 5th Earl of Angus. He was seen as a good military leader, as he did also put down rebellions. He had good relations with a number of European rulers, but in the September of 1496, he invaded England alongside the great pretender Perkin Warbeck, who wanted to dethrone Henry VII. He invaded England a number of times, and his use of warfare extended diplomacy between England and Scotland, as the English king realised how volatile of a region the Anglo-Scottish border was. There was a 7-year truce agreed between the Scots and English, and they tried to keep the area lawful, with thieves being punished and executed. Further treaties were signed to try and negotiate peace, but then James IV married Margaret Tudor, the eldest daughter of Henry VII, in an attempt to almost secure further peace. The couple would have 6 children, but only one of them reached adulthood, and the marriage resulted in the union of the crowns. James was described as, "The king is 25 years and some months old. He is of notable stature, neither tall nor short, and as handsome in complexion and shape as a man can be. His address is very agreeable. He speaks the following foreign languages: Latin, very well, French, German, Flemish, Italian and Spanish. Spanish as well as the Marquez, but he pronounces it more distinctively. He likes very much to receive Spanish letters. His own Scots language is a different from English as Aragonese from Castilian. The king speaks, besides the language of the savages, to live in some parts of Scotland and on the islands. It is as different from the Scots as Biscayan is from Castilian. His knowledge of languages is wonderful. He is well read in the Bible and in some other devout books. He is a good historian. He has read many Latin and French histories and profited by them, and he has a very good memory. He never cuts his hair or his beard. It becomes him very well." He took an interest in education and intellect, and helped to establish Scotland's first printing press. In 1507, he was granted the title the Protector and Defender of the Christian Faith by the Pope, and he received the Blessed Sword and hat in Holyrood Abbey. He planned to go on pilgrimage, but when Henry VIII came onto the throne, the relations between Scotland and England broke down. Henry VIII had no interest in appeasing James, and he saw the Scots as second class to the English. But ultimately, relations broke down heavily, and the English army invaded Scotland. James IV declared war on the English, and then the Battle of Flodden erupted following a number of border raids. James led around 42,000 men and crossed the River Tweed into England. They were well equipped, and James began the battle by firing his artillery. But things quickly went wrong for the Scottish king. His men encountered waterlogged ground and struggled, and they lost momentum, but James rode into battle himself. He placed himself at the front line and put himself in danger, but he was taking risks and it was not in his character to hold back. As the fighting continued, James IV was killed in the final stages of the battle, and Flodden was a devastating Scottish loss. The Scots had lost their king and leader. James was found after the battle lying close to the royal Scottish banner of the Red Lion rampant. One account claimed that he reached France, but was still alive, but only just. He had his left hand severed, and his throat was cut, and an arrow was through his lower jaw. The Earl of Surrey, who then became the Duke of Norfolk, whose men defeated James's army, later changed his family arms to show a red lion rampant with an arrow through its head, to represent James's slaying. His body was surrounded by the corpses of his bodyguard of archers, and he was identified. The arrow through his jaw would have stopped him from attacking the enemy well, and this allowed the English soldiers in to slash him with their bills. His body was then taken from the battlefield back to Berwick-upon-Tweed, and here it was embalmed and then sealed in a lead-lined coffin. It was then transported to Sheen Priory in Surrey, and the Carthusian monastery there. It was not allowed to be immediately buried there, as James died after being excommunicated by the Pope, after he defied the Pope's orders not to attack England whilst Henry VIII was in France. Henry VIII asked for the Scottish king to be buried in sacred ground, but then a funeral at St Paul's was granted. His torn and blood-stained coat was sent to the English king by his queen, Catherine of Aragon, who was acting as regent. But despite being allowed to be buried in St Paul's in London, James IV stayed unburied. His coffin remained above the ground at Sheen Priory, and as time went on and the decades passed by, nobody did anything with his remains. When the dissolution of the monasteries occurred, the priory was dissolved and it became land owned by Henry Grey, the first Duke of Suffolk. It was shown to John Stow during the reign of Edward VI, and it was noted that it was lying in a storeroom, unburied still. It was said that, since the dissolution of the house, I have been showed the same body as was affirmed, so lapped in lead, thrown into an old waste room, amongst old timber stone, lead and other rubble. So the Scottish king's coffin was literally just sitting in a storeroom or a shed, with lots of rubbish. It was left for more time, and during the reign of Elizabeth I, it was rediscovered. But during this time, the Scottish king's remains were desecrated, and some workmen discovered it, and it was said that they hacked off the Scottish king's head from his body. This shocking desecration for the corpse of James IV showed how barbaric people could be at the time, and it was no way to treat the remains of a human, let alone a king, who ruled Scotland well during his time in power. It was said that the king's head still had his red beard on it when it was rescued by a Londoner, who then kept it in his house, and even commented how it smelled nice. This man was Elizabeth I's master glazer, and he then asked a priest at the local church of St Michael's in London to bury it. But this church was later demolished after it caught fire during the Great Fire of London, and today a pub sits on its location. So does the head of a Scottish king today lie under a pub? But what is shocking is that this treatment of the Scottish king's remains could have occurred due to the animosity that many in England had to their neighbours north of the border. Henry VIII may have backtracked on his idea of burying an enemy monarch inside of St Paul's, and this may have been why James IV's body did not get buried. His remains, interestingly, have been lost to time, and there is no trace of what happened to them and where they are today. There were many rumours even that James survived the battle and was seen riding across the River Tweed, or that he'd been buried again in Scotland. There are 2 castles in the Scottish border that claim to be his resting place. One legend states that 4 horsemen snatched his body from the battlefield, but in the 1800s, a well of Hume Castle was being cleared. In this, a skeleton of a man with a chain around his waist was found in the side cave. But these remains too have disappeared. Some believe that this could have been James's body, and some claim that this was later then reinterred at Holyrood Abbey. This same story was told for Roxburgh Castle, and there are further legends that claim what happened to James's body. However, ultimately, his remains have been lost today. He was the king who was left unburied for centuries, and during the reign of Elizabeth I, his head was hacked from his body. Like Catherine of Valois, there was little respect given to his remains over the years, and this may have been due to the fact that, if they did remain in England, many people may have looked down upon the Scottish king's remains, as they were considered the old enemy. But James IV, as a king, did a lot of good things in Scotland, and his body deserved a significant amount of respect following his death on the battlefield. Today, however, he is remembered as the unburied King of Scotland. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.